Let's get right into it. Number 7, strategic mess. You've probably been told that a clean desk equals a clean mind, usually by someone whose idea of creativity is color-coded spreadsheets. Meanwhile, your own workspace looks like a paper avalanche had a personality crisis, and weirdly, that chaos might be doing you a favor. Picture this. You sit down to work, coffee in hand, and instead of an empty, minimalist surface, you're greeted by half-finished notes, random doodles, sticky tabs, and 3 different projects all staring at you at once like needy houseplants. It feels wrong, it looks wrong, and somehow your brain starts firing like it just found a secret power-up. Here's the psychology hiding in your mess. Your brain doesn't actually love order as much as society pretends it does. Order is calming, sure, but it's also predictable, and your brain gets bored with predictable faster than a toddler in a museum. A cluttered environment forces your mind into what psychologists call diffuse attention, where you're not locked onto one rigid track of thinking. Instead, ideas bump into each other like commuters in a crowded train station. That random receipt next to your notebook? It might spark a connection you'd never have made in a sterile workspace. People who work in messy environments often take more creative risks because their surroundings signal that rules are flexible. It's like your desk is whispering, "Look, nothing here follows a system, so why should your ideas?" Meanwhile, ultra-tidy spaces can subtly tell your brain to stay safe, stay conventional, stay boring. You're not a museum exhibit, you're a chaotic idea factory. Of course, this doesn't mean you should let moldy sandwiches accumulate in your keyboard like a science experiment. There's a difference between productive disorder and biohazard. The sweet spot is just enough visual noise to keep your mind loose without summoning an exterminator. Basically, your desk is doing improv, and you're the audience. It's wrong, it's messy, and it works. Like building a computer out of garbage and watching it run better than your actual laptop. Number 6, snooze button strategy. You know exactly how this goes. Alarm blares. You slap the snooze button with the precision of a sleep-deprived ninja. 5 minutes later, the betrayal repeats. On paper, this is a terrible habit. Sleep experts hate it. Productivity gurus treat it like a moral failing. And your future self always swears, "Tomorrow I'll get up immediately." And yet, you keep doing it. Not because you're lazy, but because your body low-key prefers this gentle torture. When you first wake up, your brain is in sleep inertia. Basically the mental equivalent of trying to run with your shoes tied together. Your heart rate, body temperature, and cortisol levels are still ramping up like a slow elevator. Jumping straight out of bed is like yanking a car from 0 to 100 without warming up the engine. The snooze button, as flawed as it is, gives your nervous system a soft runway instead of a cliff. Each mini wake-up acts like a tiny rehearsal for being alive. You drift in and out of light sleep, your body slowly increasing alertness, your brain inching closer to functional human status. It's like defrosting a frozen chicken in stages instead of blasting it with a blowtorch. Technically inefficient? Absolutely. Emotionally smoother? Also absolutely. There's even a sneaky psychological benefit. That first snooze creates a feeling of control. You chose to stay in bed, not the alarm. That small illusion of agency can make actually getting up feel less like a kidnapping and more like a decision. You're still going to be a bit groggy, but you're a groggy person who consented to consciousness. Is this the optimal way to wake up? No. But humans are not optimization machines. We're comfort-seeking, semi-functional meat robots. The snooze button is basically your brain's security blanket with a timer. It's wrong, it fragments your sleep, and you'll still regret it slightly, but it gets you from zombie to person without emotional whiplash. Congratulations, your nervous system just negotiated with your alarm like a union worker. Number 5, productive procrastination. You've definitely experienced this. You have a week to finish something, so naturally you do. Nothing for 6 days and then become a productivity demigod in the last 12 hours. Friends call you irresponsible. Professors call it a miracle. Your brain calls it performance mode. Procrastination is supposed to be a villain, but sometimes it's more like a dubious personal trainer who only works when you're panicking. Here's the sciencey bit. Your brain operates best under a certain level of pressure, known as the Yerkes-Dodson law. Too little stress and you're bored, scrolling, staring into the void. Too much stress and you're paralyzed, vibrating like a stressed squirrel. But that sweet middle zone, that's where focus, creativity, and speed suddenly kick in. By procrastinating, you're basically manufacturing that perfect stress cocktail. When the deadline is distant, your brain sees no urgency. Time feels like a wide, empty highway, and your motivation decides to take a nap. But as the clock tightens, adrenaline spikes, distractions fade, and suddenly you're locked in like a laser-guided academic missile. You enter what some people call the deadline tunnel, where emails don't exist, snacks materialize, and you somehow write an essay in one night that looks like it took a month. There's also something called Parkinson's law. Work expands to fill the time available. If you gave yourself 2 weeks, you'd meander, overthink, and polish every sentence into existential despair. By waiting until the last minute, you shrink the time window and force decisions. Perfectionism dies, efficiency lives. It's a risky strategy. Sometimes the tunnel collapses, Wi-Fi fails, or your brain simply refuses to cooperate. But when it works, it feels like controlled chaos, like intentionally driving toward a cliff because you know your parachute only opens at the very last second. So yes, procrastination is wrong. Your calendar hates it, your therapist frowns at it, and your future self keeps leaving passive-aggressive notes. But for many people, that ticking clock is the only thing that flips the switch from meh to masterpiece. You're not lazy, you're just using panic as premium fuel. Number 4. The ugly first draft. Stare at a blank page long enough and it starts to look back at you like a judgmental aquarium. Your instincts tell you to craft something perfect immediately. Elegant sentences, pristine logic, zero typos, vibes immaculate. And yet, every writer, artist, and half-competent human who has ever made anything will tell you to do the exact opposite. Deliberately write something bad first. Not slightly imperfect, actively terrible, chaotic, cringy, the literary equivalent of throwing wet spaghetti at a wall. This feels deeply wrong because school trained you to polish before you present, to hide the messy thinking, to erase the doodles in the margins. But your brain doesn't actually create in a straight, neat line. Creativity is more like rummaging through a cluttered attic with a flashlight while screaming, "I know it's up here somewhere!" If you try to be perfect from sentence 1, you activate your inner critic, a tiny, smug lawyer in your head that objects to everything. Too basic, too dramatic, sounds stupid. Suddenly you're not writing, you're performing for an imaginary audience that hates you. The ugly first draft flips that dynamic. By giving yourself permission to be bad, you lower the stakes so much that your brain relaxes and actually starts producing ideas. Psychologists call this reducing cognitive load. You stop spending mental energy on quality control and start spending it on imagination. It's like sketching with a crayon instead of a surgical scalpel. Messy, but free. There's also a sneaky memory trick here. When you vomit ideas onto the page without filtering them, your brain makes more connections because it isn't scared of looking foolish. Later, when you edit, you're not creating from nothing, you're sculpting from clay. You can shape, refine, and upgrade instead of summoning brilliance from the void. So yes, your first draft is supposed to be bad. That's not a flaw, that's the design. You're not building a house. You're piling bricks in a field and pretending they're meaningful. It's wrong, it's embarrassing, and it's how literally everything good begins. Congratulations, your masterpiece started as a dumpster fire. Number 3. Helpful white lies. Imagine your friend asks, "Do I look good in this?" You glance at the outfit, which resembles a geometric crime, and for a split second you face a moral crisis. Truth? Honesty? Philosophical integrity? Or do you smile and say, "Yeah, you look great," like a professional emotional bodyguard? We're taught that lying is bad, full stop. But humans engage in something called pro-social lying all the time. Tiny falsehoods that keep social life from collapsing into brutal chaos. Here's the psychology. Humans are not walking fact machines. We are delicate emotional ecosystems. If everyone spoke pure, unfiltered truth at all times, society would resemble a reality show with no producers. Pro-social lies act like social lubricant. They reduce conflict, protect feelings, and maintain relationships. When you say "it's fine" instead of "I'm deeply annoyed," you're not being fake, you're strategically managing social harmony. There's even evidence that these small lies can improve group cooperation. If people constantly pointed out every mistake, flaw, or awkward moment, trust would erode faster than a sandcastle at high tide. White lies create psychological safety, which makes people more willing to share ideas, take risks, and generally exist around each other without trauma. Your brain is surprisingly good at this balancing act. You don't lie about everything, just the things that would cause unnecessary harm. Your presentation sucked gets softened into, "It was interesting," not because you're deceitful, but because you're socially intelligent. Of course, there's a line. Massive deception? Bad. Gaslighting? Absolutely not. But those little fibs, "I loved your cooking. Great to see you. No, I'm not tired," are less about truth and more about kindness. They're shortcuts to emotional stability in a world that's already stressful enough. So yes, you are technically lying. Your ethics professor is probably twitching, but those harmless untruths keep friendships intact, workplaces functional, and family dinners from turning into cage matches. It's wrong, it's slightly dishonest, and it's basically the glue of civilization. Number 2, plain hard to get. You text someone, they don't reply immediately. You wait, they wait. The waiting becomes a psychological chess match where nobody admits they're playing. From a rational standpoint, this is absurd. If you like someone, just say so, right? But humans, especially in dating, often intentionally create distance because, bizarrely, it can make attraction stronger. This taps into something called perceived value. Your brain is wired to want things that feel scarce or effortful. If someone is instantly available, always texting back, always agreeing, your brain categorizes them as low effort, low challenge, low dopamine. But if they're slightly elusive, your brain goes, wait, why do I want this so much? Suddenly you're emotionally invested like a detective chasing a mysterious suspect. There's also a power dynamic at play. By not responding immediately, you signal that you have a life, priorities, and options. Even if you're actually just staring at your phone in pajamas, that tiny bit of uncertainty keeps the interaction interesting. Certainty kills tension, ambiguity fuels desire. Psychologists call this intermittent reinforcement, the same mechanism that makes slot machines addictive. If someone were perfectly predictable, you'd lose interest, but if their attention comes in unpredictable bursts, your brain gets hooked. You're not chasing the person, you're chasing the next dopamine hit. Of course, taken too far, this turns into emotional warfare. Ghosting, mind games, and emotional breadcrumbing are not cute. They're exhausting, but mild, hard-to-get behavior. Taking your time, not oversharing immediately, maintaining boundaries, can actually make relationships healthier by preventing one-sided attachment. So yes, pretending to be less available than you are is technically manipulative and slightly ridiculous. You're playing emotional chess while dressed in sweatpants. But that tiny bit of resistance makes connection feel earned rather than handed out like free samples at a grocery store. It's wrong. It's theatrical, and your brain eats it up anyway. Number 1, talking to yourself. You're walking down the street, muttering under your breath like a haunted Bluetooth speaker that escaped. People glance at you nervously. You pretend you're on a call. Classic. Talking to yourself has been labeled crazy for centuries, but science has quietly given it a thumbs up. And honestly, it might be one of the smartest, weird things you do. When you speak out loud, you externalize your thoughts. Instead of a tangled mental knot, your ideas become linear, structured, and easier to manipulate. Athletes do this constantly. Breathe, focus, don't rush. Teachers, chefs, pilots, surgeons, and basically anyone doing something complicated will narrate their actions like a personal documentary. There's real cognitive power here. Verbal self-instruction improves working memory, attention, and problem solving. It's like upgrading your brain from background app to full screen mode. You're not just thinking, you're actively guiding your mind like a coach on the sidelines. Self-talk also regulates emotions. When you say, okay, I'm stressed but I can handle this, you activate the same calming pathways as if someone else said it to you. Your brain responds better to spoken reassurance than to silent panic. It's therapy, but cheaper and slightly weirder. Children naturally talk to themselves while learning because it helps them process new information. Adults just get embarrassed and shove that habit into a mental closet labeled socially unacceptable. But every time you whisper, "Where are my keys?" or mutter through a math problem, you're tapping into that same tool. And then there's the creativity angle. Talking out loud can spark insights you'd never reach internally. Your brain treats spoken words as more concrete, forcing you to clarify fuzzy ideas. Suddenly, solutions appear like magic, or like you just bullied your brain into cooperation. So yes, you look unhinged pacing around your room having a one-person debate. Your neighbors might be concerned, but you're not crazy. You're outsourcing cognition to your mouth. It's wrong, it's awkward, and it's basically a free performance boost for your mind. Your brain just needed a co-host. Subscribe to see more.